Hi, my name is Rick Bloodworth, and today is day 18 of the 90-day study through the New Testament. Our study today is going to be looking at Luke chapter 8 through Luke chapter 10, and there's lots of really important lessons within those chapters, but it's one in particular I want to discuss today. It's found in Luke chapter 8. It's the parable of the sower. You're going to also see this particular parable described by Matthew in Matthew chapter 13 and by Mark in Mark chapter 4. So I'll kind of go back and forth between some of these parables as far as the different information that's given, but since it's the same parable, we're going to get the hopefully a good overview of it. Anyway, Jesus begins to talk about a farmer who went out to sow seed. And he said some of it fell on the path where it was trampled on and where the birds of the air ate it. Well, the second group of seeds fell among the rocks where the soil was shallow. And because the soil was shallow, the seed grew very quickly. But then it also withered and died quickly because it was too shallow. Well, the third group of seed fell among the thorns, where certainly it grew up, but it was choked out and it didn't produce. And then he talked about the fourth group of seed that fell among the good soil. And Jesus reveals that this seed produced from 30 to 60 to even 100 times what was sown. And then, after he had told that, the disciples took him aside privately and they asked about the meaning of these parables. And so Jesus told them, the farmer sowing the seed stands for the sowing of the Word of God. And then he talked about how the soil represented the hearts of the people. As a matter of fact, in Luke chapter 8, he talks about where it fell upon good soil, standing for good and noble heart. So keep that in mind as you go through the parable, that the seed is the Word of God, and that the soil is the individual's heart. Well, he begins by explaining the seed that fell upon the path, the hard surface of the path. It couldn't grow, and so it was trampled upon. And he said, the evil one comes and takes the seed so that they will not be saved. Well, think about that for a moment, but the next group of seed falls among the rocks, and it grows up very quickly. But the soil is not deep enough, because after a while it goes down to the rock and it can't take root. And so Jesus says this seed stands for those who receive the word gladly at first with joy. But after a while, the cares of the world and the trials and the tribulations make the seed unproductive, and it dies. Well, the third group falls among the thorns. And he said the thorns stands for those who allow the cares and the struggles of this life to keep them from being productive. He also says the deceitfulness of wealth will keep the seed from being productive among this group of people. In other words, their heart is divided. Their loyalty is divided. You remember where Jesus said you can't serve two masters. You'll either love the one and hate the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. And he said you cannot serve both God and money. Well, I think that's kind of what happens with the seed that falls among the thorns. We want to do good for God, but there's so many competing influences, and we really never settle upon who is the king of our life, and so we're not productive for God. But it's the fourth soil that's so important, because it stands for those with a good and noble heart. And this seed finds a productive place to grow, and because of that, it produces a great harvest, 30 times, 60 times, 100 times what's sown. And of course, that's what God wants. When you think about it, our hearts really are the determining factor of whether or not the seed, the Word, will grow, because the seed is good. The seed is the Word of God. So if the seed, the good Word, finds good soil, it has to grow. We might think that it's unfair that some of the seed falls upon those with a hard heart, where Satan can take the seed away and therefore they're not saved. But that's because of us. That's because of our hardness of heart. Now other people can influence that hardness, it's true. And there's a lot of people who have not had the opportunity that we have had, which should make us all the more determined to try and go and teach people the good news of Jesus. As a matter of fact, that's part of those with the good and noble heart, because they're going to produce a crop. And so sometimes that production is with those who had at one time had a hard heart. Well, the shallow heart we can relate to. We've all gotten real enthusiastic about something at one point or another, only to find our attention waned a little bit and something else took our attention and we stopped doing what we were so excited about at first. People are that way with the Word of God. They're really excited, they become Christians, but it's just not for them when they realize how much effort is required and exactly what God means by loving Him with all of our heart and soul and mind and strength. Well, that among the thorns I think applies to a lot of us, doesn't it? Don't we all struggle with things that kind of choke out our productivity? We want to do good for God, and we are growing. We're growing among the thorns, though. And since there are trials, and since there are temptations to go after wealth and other things, we sometimes get so distracted that we're just not effective for God. When we're like that, we need to really pause and take a good, honest look at ourselves and determine whether or not we really want to continue in that direction or not. I don't know if you ever read Louis L'Amour. Louis L'Amour is an author I've always enjoyed. It's not very deep literature, I suppose, so you'll have to forgive me for that, but I enjoy it. There was one thought he had in one of his books that I really appreciated, though the character in the book said something along the lines of this: every person has within his ability to say, "This I am today, that I will be tomorrow." But then he said at some point the wish has to be implemented with action. Well, if you really do have a good heart, at some point the seed, the Word of God within you, is going to produce. But it's going to take effort. It's going to take a lot of effort. But the thing to remember when we're talking about the productive seed is just this. This is other people's souls. We're not just talking about whether or not we'll be in heaven with God someday. We're talking about whether we can assist others along the journey. And if you have a good and noble heart, that's exactly what you're going to want to do. Now, we are going to be distracted at times. We are going to be shallow at times. And even at times, we're going to be hard-hearted. But at some point, we have to determine, I'm here today, but this is where I want to be. And then you got to do it. The question is that you have to answer for yourself is, which soil type am I? Which heart do I have? And then, is this something that's pleasing to God? And if it's not, what will I do about it? Well, only you can answer that question. I suspect that you're wanting to do something about it, though, or you wouldn't be studying right now. And so let me encourage you to continue your study through the New Testament. You're going to find wonderful things every day that will help you to grow and will help you to be a better friend, a better parent, a better servant of God in every aspect. And someday, because of your perseverance and because of the grace of God, maybe you can produce a crop that's 30 or 60 or 100 times what was sown. I pray that God will richly bless the rest of your studies, and we'll see you tomorrow.